Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm going to share my screen, and I look forward to talking with you about this topic. So it's great to be here, as I say, at the Palestine Digital Activism Forum. I'm Sam Gregory, the Executive Director of Witness. We work with human rights defenders and journalists worldwide, including in Palestine, to use video and technology to expose the truth. So we care deeply about how people create trustworthy, authenticable media, and we work at a local level with those on the front lines of doing this. And as part of that, we also work really proactively on the systemic technological shifts that will impact the capacity to believe and trust those critical voices and accounts. And we've coordinated a global effort to prepare, don't panic, around deepfake synthetic media and now generative AI, these new ways to simulate and manipulate reality, and on how to fortify the truth of frontline journalists, of human rights defenders. And I'm going to draw on elements of that work, listening closely to the realities of human rights defenders from the global majority, providing a rapid response mechanism for claims of fakery, and advocating for a rights-respecting infrastructure for trust to make a call for action on what we must do together to ensure that the right voices are empowered and centered going forward. So there'll be many dimensions to AI that we will engage with over the course of the forum, but I'm going to focus on the blue and the white circles here, synthetic media and deepfakes that create or manipulate realistic looking or sounding images, audio, and video. And before I get to the call to action in the second half of my presentation, let's talk first about what's actually happening in the world. It's a world where, with advances in generative AI and deepfakery, it only takes a few seconds of my voice to fake me, a few images of you to fake you, and the realism of this media keeps improving. So what are we seeing, particularly in the context of this year's elections, which will impact over half the world's population? And I'm going to talk to the global context, but the acuteness of the potential implications of these for civil society in Palestine are clear to me. The original sin of this technology is non-consensual sexual images. That is still true and getting worse, harming women and girls worldwide and chilling women's ability to participate in the public sphere. Audio clones, trivially easy to make, are starting to be deployed in key elections and political context. Here on screen, you can see the notable Biden robocall deepfake from the US. And in many contexts globally, we've seen the use of manipulated dubbing of the lips and audio to have candidates withdraw from elections, boycott, or propose voting for another candidate, as with this politician in Pakistan. That's outright deception. But there's also what Nigat Dad and Ruman Chowdhury termed soft fakes, humanizing AI fakery, for example, with clones of India's Prime Minister Modi singing, or cuddly avatars of the presidential and vice presidential candidates from Indonesia, Prabowo and Gibran, that disguise the reality that Prabowo is a former military general and serial human rights abuser, not a cuddly grandfather. Or also from Indonesia, there's a resurrection deepfake of former military dictator Suharto, recalled from beyond the grave to ask people to vote for his party. And there's also the increasing use of synthetic media to expand political communication. For example, here with the creation of personalized clones of Indian politicians who can address you by name in voter outreach, of images of politicians meeting with voter groups they never actually met with. Here, these are AI-generated images of meetings with children and farmers from a politician in India. Or Imran Khan in Pakistan using a voice clone to address his supporters from behind bars. And in political speech, we have satire too, the cornerstone of free expression and a core usage of synthetic media. Here I share an example from Taiwan of a faked Xi Jinping wishing goodwill to the Taiwanese electorate in advance of the elections. Hint, he didn't really. And of course, with all satire, those in power want to shut it down. So in the middle, I highlight how a young Indian man who used a voice clone to satirize a politician was prosecuted for doing so. And of course, AI-generated images is increasingly a part of participatory global campaigns for human rights and for justice, as with the All Eyes on Rafah image that spread virally just recently. At Witness, we encounter many examples of deepfakes via this deepfakes rapid response force we run. that connects frontline journalists and rights defenders to media forensics expertise. And I should note that in many cases, we find that people are trying to use claims of AI as the get out of jail free card to escape responsibility for their words or to dismiss inconvenient truths. And they trade on the distrust we have and the uncertainty we have as a public about this, as did this Indian politician caught pretending a real clip was faked with AI, and whose public defense included citing the use of AI by Drake and The Weeknd and the ease of faking reality. So a fundamental and growing challenge is not only detecting what is faked, but protecting the integrity of what is real, including critical evidence of gross human rights violations and war crimes. The future is full of profound challenges in detecting what is fake and protecting what is real. So I want to move now on how we can act on this. There is time to prevent a dystopian future if we act now. If we prepare, don't panic, we can make it through this. There are very early signs in many of these examples I'm giving of the future we're moving towards, but we're not there yet. While optimism and inspiration can be hard, and particularly so in the Palestine context now, both and with the context of the realities of deceptive generative AI as well as other forms of AI, we can state what we demand and need. And panic will not serve us. Panic about this AI phenomena just plays into the hands of companies and governments who will abuse our fears and into the hands of people who already want to claim that we can't believe anything you see and use AI as an excuse. First, let's be really clear. It's not our fault that we can't spot the signs of AI. Think back to one of the more benign AI images that many people have seen. How many of you thought for a moment that the Pope really was wearing that puffer jacket? And for those of you thinking, I wasn't duped, I know how to spot a deepfake, any tip to spot AI you know now is already outdated. Six-fingered hands used to be more common, not so more anymore. Technical improvements sweep away those clues that we hope to rely on to discern real from AI. It can't and it shouldn't be on us as individuals to try and make a guess without any help. We need to invest in big picture structural solutions, and we need to ground those in the realities and needs of the global majority and marginalized populations worldwide. I'm going to come back to this later, but we can't let AI play out like we let the development of social media play out, with the global north and corporate priorities centered above the rest of the world and our common need for shared reality. Now, to get to that more positive future, there are 3 steps we need to take. The first is, as the volume of AI generation increases, we need to close the gap in access to detection skills and tools for people on the front lines of trying to fight deception and defend reality. Many of those people are doing the same things as you or I, trying to listen too closely to the audio clip or spot a glitch in the image. And if they run the tools they're most likely to have access to, say you find an online deepfake detector on the top of your internet search, those are as likely to give a false positive or negative as provide a useful result. This detector got the famous falsified Pentagon fire image from last year right at first, but then declared it was made by a human when presented with a slightly cropped version of it. There are some big challenges in detection, don't get me wrong, and because of inherent limitations, detection tools will likely never be more than about 80 to 85% effective, even in the best case. Despite that, we've got to invest in bridging what we call the detection equity gap to tools and capacities relevant to global contexts and languages, not just English and the people who live in the US and Europe. And we need to make sure they're in the hands of a critical first line of defense. That's journalists and human rights defenders globally who must defend their realities in the face of distrust and lying governments. Step 1 was about equitable access to detection after the fact. Step 2, AI is going to be everywhere in our media, adding elements, modifying scenes. It's not going to be as simple as a yes, it's AI, or no, it's not. So we also need to make it easier for all of us to understand the recipe of what we're seeing and hearing. We need transparency on the recipe. Already, technologists are building systems for things like invisible watermarking of AI-generated content, as well as to add cryptographically signed metadata to media. You can think of that as ways to show details about content signed in a way that reinforces trust in that information, to show a record of how AI was used to make or edit, where humans or other technologies were involved and how it was shared. Basically, maybe an analogy, a recipe and serving instructions for what mix of AI and human was used to make what you're viewing or hearing. And we need this as part of a new AI-infused media literacy. And from journalists and human rights defenders globally, we've heard at Witness a consistent interest in these media transparency approaches. People want to know when AI is being used to amuse them, to deceive them, to communicate with them. But they ask it only if it has a nuanced design and implementation that ensures global applicability, avoids centralized control, and protects human rights. And only if these approaches don't unfairly shift the burden of proof to make it even harder for marginalized voices to be heard. And as one part of that, we can't force a citizen journalist filming in a repressive context, filming in Palestine, or a satirical maker using novel, generative AI tools to parody the powerful, to have to share their name or personally identifiable information just because they're using their cell phone camera or ChatGPT. Because it needs to be possible to retain anonymity, even if the tools we use to create in an ever more complex era are transparent. This has to be about the how, not the who, of AI human media making and information production. As we need to move forward, we need to continue to insist that our technologies protect privacy, are opt-in, and do not collect by default personally identifiable information. We need to ensure that these tools and approaches to ensure transparency in a complex AI human world grounded in the access and privacy needs of global majorities and don't unfairly raise the expectation or burden of proof on people who already have their realities dismissed and that they cannot easily be weaponized by illegitimate governments or surveillance. Finally, none of this works if we do not place a pipeline responsibility that runs all the way from the people and the companies developing the AI foundation models, the open source models, through those deploying the systems, the APIs, the apps built on them, to the distribution platforms, like the platforms that we have justifiably placed the emphasis on over the past years for their responsibility to our societies. We need to have that pipeline of responsibility so we can ensure liability is placed where it's needed for both transparency on benign synthesis and penalties on areas like non-consensual sexual deepfakes. Like many of you, I've spent much of the last 15 years fighting the failures of how platforms and social media were built and run, and the global implications for people and human rights. I'm tired and angry about the mistakes and the continued mistakes. We can't let this happen with this next generation of tech. We must not repeat the mistakes of social media and place the overwhelming responsibility to navigate the harms on the user and the society, particularly in the global majority. And when it's global North governments who are setting these mandates, for example, these technical solutions, they need to do it understanding the implications of these tools for the global majority, not just their own citizens or constituencies. We need to take these steps because it shouldn't be on all of us to be left suffering the consequences of another technological step, or left trying to spot the six-fingered hand or the eyes that don't blink. Our realities as human rights defenders need to be reinforced rather than undermined in a world where it gets easier to both claim reality as false and to make false and fake reality. To do that, there is an opportunity for us to do better. If we can build these robust foundations that enable us to discern authentic from simulated, tools to fortify the critical realities of human rights defenders, the evidence from the ground, the vital voices, and powerful detection technology that doesn't raise more doubts than it fixes. And it requires that the voices of human rights defenders and the global majority be centered now in the discussions of what solutions we need, rather than sidelined as they were with social media. Thank you.